Hello everyone and welcome back to another Strategoi video. Today we're going to be doing a double tournament report. No, not a tournament report of a doubles event, but a tournament report for two separate tournaments that we had going on in the past 6 weeks or so. Originally, the idea was that I was going to have not only Nick on here, but also our buddy Hank and our buddy Paul, because all four of us were at both of these, and all four of us used exactly the same list, which felt like it would be really easy to talk over four different matchup scenarios, or four different people's sets of matchups, and we actually had some overlap there too. I played Paul twice, once in each tournament, and Nick played Hank in the first of the two tournaments. So it would have actually made for a faster chat and experience than maybe we would have otherwise predicted. But we couldn't get Hank and Paul on the same time schedule with us, so it's just me and Nick here. Nick, how are you doing today?
Great. Glad to be back and glad to not share the spotlight with the other two. This is my time, so we're ready to go.
I know you've got this sort of artificial rivalry with Hank now.
The most artificial thing in the world. We don't actually have a rivalry, but we like to pretend we do.
Yeah. So, anyway, for those of you that are following, don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't subscribed already, and all the normal YouTube stuff. Sorry it's taken so long for us to get another video out here. I know Jonas has been kind of overwhelmed with stuff on his end, and I have been dealing with this Google problem that made me almost lose my 3,500 word script for the coming Math Hammer video. So hopefully that'll come out within the next week or so. But hopefully this ties you over, and let's get on into it. So as per usual, we've got a summary here where we're just really going over all the normal things: the tournament review, army list, matchups, and then concluding with some thoughts at the end there. As far as the tournament review is concerned, let's break it down into the rules pack, the meta, and the experience, and we'll be doing both tournaments one after the other kind of in a row here so that we don't spend too much time on the overall if it's not necessary. Looking at the rules pack and players and rounds, we've got Bloodstorm with 32 players, 3 games each, 3 hours, and then the Crusade the same, which is 34 players. But the same amount of games and hours. It's worth pointing out that Bloodstorm took place. Bloodstorm is kind of the name of the club, and it takes place usually in Eindhoven in the Netherlands here. And the Crusade is hosted by the Green Knight folks, and that took place in Bruges, Belgium. So Nick and I this was Nick's first time to go over to Bruges for one of their tournaments, but my third time. So we'll talk a little bit more about the tournament experience in a minute. As far as missions were concerned, and we'll try to get into this where it makes sense, but honestly, it's been a while since Bloodstorm happened, and the Crusade is definitely more on our minds. But we had at Bloodstorm Head-On Collision, Silksteel Nest, and Realmstone Cache. And then in the Crusade, we had Prize of Gallet, Nidus Paths, and Presence of Idols. Nick, what do you think the chances are that, I don't think these two were in communication with one another, that they would pick entirely separate battle plans? Do you feel like the current GHB's battle plans are varied and interesting enough for tournament play that this is like to be expected? I mean, I feel like we've seen Realmstone Cache at a lot of these tournaments, if not a number of these other battle plans, and so I would have expected at least one to overlap. What are your thoughts?
I think the potential for overlap is really there, but these 6 are really, I would say, pretty common in some, combination of them. What I do notice between the two is that the Crusade picked ones that were kind of, in my opinion, like the way that I think of them, are like kind of nothing battle plans. So the prize is just like activating, you just do it over time. Nidus, I personally, I never use it, so it's just kind of a wonky deployment, and then just going for that. And then again, Presence of Idols is just doing things I was going to do anyways, and just maybe getting some extra points. So these ones aren't really that standoutish to me. Whereas when you think about like Silksteel, is a really good way to capitalize on points, and then also Realmstone is changing your playstyle entirely. So I think there was an interesting kind of shift in it. Usually you get like a mix of things like that, but these ones were almost entirely separate, which made for an interesting day.
For the people that are, and honestly, we've changed our GHB so many times at this point that I always forget which one's which sometimes. Let's go through them real quickly, what the basic gist is of each one. Head-on collision. Can you give me the summary of that guy?
Head-on collision, I can if I grab my GHB in a second.
Right. Is this the one where it's 5? I can't remember. Is this the one with the 5 different objectives? There's 3 in the middle and then 2 on each side, and then you get to choose which one's activated. Is that the one?
No, that's the prize.
Okay, yeah.
I'll just go through it this way. So the prize of Gallet, if you will, is the 5 objectives, which are kind of in a sideways cube, if you will. And then you just pick which ones are activated each time as you go through. The Realm Stone, I'm just going through by the GHB as I turn pages here. Sure. Realm Stone starts in the middle and then it explodes, goes into 2 different locations. So that one, you kind of just have to wait and time it out. What do we got next? Presence of Idols is the one where you have the corner deployment. So they split the deployment zones into the big squares, and then you just pick 3 of your units to be an idol, vice versa. You get some extra points, reduce how many people run away. Super exciting. Silk Steel is the one that you can burn the objective, so I think that's the one with the 8 plans.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, points. Nidus Path is the one with the really crazy deployment, which is like a weird checkered thing when you look at it, and then you can teleport if you are in the corner to the other side of the corner.
Yeah. And
the last one, if we think about head-on collision, this is the one with 3 in the diagonal center.
Oh, right. And what do you get? What are the extra rules for that?
This is the one where you actually get extra points if you control it with Galician veterans. When you get one with a Galician veteran, so you're kind of just upping on that. And it's not hold 1, hold 2 more. It's 1 in your area, right. 2 for the middle, and 4 for your opponent.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yep. I play a lot. Like I average 10 games a month, but like I some of these I have a real hard time remembering which one's which because the names don't necessarily line up. So like Presence of Idols, I keep in mind because I know you choose idol units and those are the ones that get extra points. Nidus Pass is teleport. Realmstone Cache, I know that it's the cache in the middle and it explodes. But honestly, the other ones could be like you could interchange the names. And honestly, like they'd make almost as much sense as the other ones. Like Head-on Collision and Prize of Gallet or whatever. Why not? Who cares? Like that doesn't tell you anything about how the mission works, right?
I mean, Head-on Collision, Mighty and Cunning, and then like there's another one that's just like right on the same area with the wording. It's like, yeah, gun to my head, I wouldn't be able to pick it out. Won't back down. I wouldn't be able to split those 3 up of like which one is which.
Right.
Never.
Right. I think they need to do. I mean, I think we'll see. I think we're gonna have that new GHB in sometime in January, mid-January is the rumor, but we'll have to see how people react to only having 6 months with a set of battle plans and then all of a sudden having to memorize new ones, unless they don't change the battle plans. That is possible. Who knows? So
yeah, maybe.
All right. So let's the scoring is the normal thing. For those that don't know, essentially you total the amount of victory points you have, and then they'll give you a chart that sometimes differs from tournament to tournament, but the chart will more or less tell you how many tournament points you score based off of how different your score was. So if you got like more than a 20-point difference or something, or I forget what it is. Do you remember what the extreme usually is to get full 20-0?
Typically, it's either 19 or 20 points, and you get a 20-0, depending on which tournament you're at.
Yeah. So I know some battle plans it's not even physically possible, like mathematically possible in 5 turns to get that large of a spread. So, we talk about this a lot. I'm not crazy about the differential system, but I get why we use it. So, all right, let's move on to the meta. We agreed that this was a pretty competitive set of tournaments here, even though it's a one-dayer with three games apiece. I don't know, maybe it's just that the community has gotten more competitive, especially leading into Worlds being hosted here in Amsterdam. I could see it just like the community in general and everyone that's going is ready to kind of show up and really test out their lists. And then Bloodstorm, which was in Eindhoven, was more local than the Crusade. The Crusade in Bruges, Maybe it's because it's, Belgium is a two-language country with both Flemish, Dutch, and French. But I think we had a few players from France. We definitely had a large contingent, about 12 people from the Netherlands come in, which is a big deal. And obviously, Nick and I are American of origin, so like that is also, even though we're coming from the Netherlands, it's already mixing it up a bit more. And Nick, you felt like the Crusade in Bruges was a little bit more competitive than Bloodstorm, even, right?
I'm going to be biased on that one just because, playing with these people so regularly that I have been, I kind of know their play style, I know their personality, so that I can kind of already anticipate some moves a little bit. I know when I went into Bruges, like each game when we'll talk about it was just such a fight. And then when I look at, like our comrades that we traveled with, I don't think anybody had a walk in the park. Like everybody really was fighting hard for their wins, putting a lot of energy into it. And there weren't a lot of just like phoning it in wins of like, yeah, I can just hang out. I'm going to take this right away. So it just felt different, I think. And also, I think because we don't know everyone there, like it's not our community, that you don't have that sort of friendship there already. Not to say that everybody was rude or anything, but the idea is like when I play against someone I know, the stress level can be quite low. We're just having a good time playing the game. We're playing competitively and like doing everything we can to win, but it's just a different vibe there. So that was just kind of how I was gotten. I really enjoyed playing in Bruges, so I thought it was a nice scene, and like you said, it was my first time playing with this bunch of people. So I was really impressed. Loved the scenery. I'm a big sucker for scenery, and that really stole my attention for quite some time. I think I was just running around for 20 minutes taking a bunch of pictures of it all.
Yeah, and they have one of the better setups. I feel like there's a restaurant within walking distance that's it's inside the building really. That's actually nice. The beer selection's nice. The sandwich they gave us was pretty solid, all things considered. Although I think you went for the free beer, not knowing what kind of sandwich you were going to get. And the people are super friendly there. And obviously, in Eindhoven for the Bloodstorm events, we know the hosts, and we're all friends with them too. I think it's always remarkable to me going to Belgium and then not knowing people. I've had only lovely experiences with the people in Ghent. They might have a large contingency that's from Ghent, but in Bruges, Ghent's nearby, by the way. But this group, the Green Knight, has been so friendly to me over the past 3 visits. And then technically, when you and I went to a tournament in Mechelen, which is closer to Antwerp, a number of those Green Knight people were there too. So I think in total, how many times have you played in Belgium now? You've got 1 in Bruges, 2 in Mechelen, and 1 in Antwerp, right? So that's 4?
The 4th time, yeah.
Yeah, cool. And you're about to go back to Luxembourg, which we'll talk about maybe in the conclusion. So, Looking at the armies, at Bloodstorm, we saw a very high number of KO players. 4 out of 32 players is pretty big, and 4 Stormcast lists, also pretty big. That KO threat was very much looming on my horizon as playing a Tzeentch list that was built around shooting, and I'm super fragile to shooting like that. So I was certain I was going to get some bad matchups, and I didn't end up having anything that was particularly rough at the end of the day. Notably, there were no cities, Lumineth, Slaanesh, Skaven, OBR, or Oryx. Of that list of 6 different armies, we could call Oryx 3 or 4 if you want. Which of those surprises you that wasn't there at all at Bloodstorm?
I think Lumineth probably surprises me. There's usually 1.
Yeah, I think Lex was going to play Lumineth, but he ended up being a TO or he was a reserve player or something.
Yeah, and then also I think the surprise is that there's no version of the Oryx there. I think you usually will see one of the war clans at some point.
Yeah, how did you feel about 4 times KO, 4 times Stormcast? I suppose you'd probably agree that 4 times Stormcast isn't crazy. Like Stormcast is just popular.
Yeah, for my list, going up against Stormcast, it's not the easiest thing in the world, but it's doable. Like I don't go like, oh geez, here we go. KO, I absolutely have to just all right, buckle up, let's see how it goes. Let's hope the dice don't hate me today. And that's really nothing I can do with my list, especially against shooting and guaranteed shooting, let's call it. Like, if they outdraw me, they're going to get it. So if someone wants to alpha me, then that's how that goes. Yeah. So I was definitely having the same sinking feeling of, oh, geez, that's a lot of guns.
Buckle up, buckaroo. Yeah, it's good. The Caitlyn Jenner thing from South Park. Yeah, buckle up, buckaroo. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's KO is a nightmare for a lot of people. I'm really hoping they get that first order battle tome in the spring, and it turns into a more pleasurable experience playing against them instead of play against 40k light. So the Crusade had, as you mentioned when we were discussing this, much more iteration from the looks of it. Granted, there were 2 more armies. We had 4 Nurgle, which doesn't surprise me at all. Like, Nurgle's super popular. But we had 3 Stormcast Soulblight Daughters, I think all of which had Marathi, but I could be wrong, and 3 times Nighthaunt. And then there was no KO, which is in stark contrast to the previous tournament. No Legion the First Prince, but that's pretty normal. Slaves to Darkness, less normal. Sons of Behemoth, Fire Slayers, Khorne, Slaanesh, or Skaven. So some common overlaps here with the nuns would be no Slaanesh and no Skaven, which I don't think... maybe the Skaven surprises me a bit. I feel like when the Skaven Battle Tome first came out, the new one, people were pretty excited about playing Eshin builds. And then I guess it's just kind of fallen off the tournament scene really quickly. Have you played against Skaven?
Not in a tournament, no. So I've played some practice games against them, but nothing super competitive.
Okay. Well, get ready for my 4 times Warp Lightning Cannon list. We'll see what happens.
Right. I cannot wait.
Yeah, I'm psyched. What about the rest of the meta? Did you, of the no lists, like the armies that aren't present, does anything surprise you there?
Yeah, I think Suns kind of surprised me. I didn't really expect to not have any of that.
Do you think that's because of the new Battle Tome?
It's hard to say, because I mean, like, it's just a weird matchup because there's a couple of these that I would expect. Like, I'd absolutely expect KO, absolutely expect Suns. Personally, I mean, it's rare that we get away with not seeing slaves or fire slayers. Usually, there's at least one guy running around with them. So this was weird. Like, I was fine not seeing Legions of the First Prince or Slaanesh and Skaven. It's pretty common. Khorne also I'm okay with not seeing. But, yeah, I thought those ones were standout-ish to me. Yeah,
it's worth pointing out that this was before the Slaves book was official, and also before the Ogre Maw Tribes book, the new one, was official. So one of my buddies, Arno, he ended up playing Maw Tribes despite the fact that they were still on old rules, which, good for him. One last chance to go give it a shot. So, all right, let's move on. So overall experience, we said it was super friendly despite being competitive, both tournaments. Then there were no notable meta differences between the tournaments, and we basically just covered that. And perhaps I was saying that perhaps this was one last go with the current GHB. You've got a couple, you got the Luxembourg Teams tournament coming up, and you've also got an invitational, a local one here. But otherwise, we're pretty much... You're going to play at LVO, right, in Vegas in mid-January. Do you think that'll be on the new GHB?
I really hope it isn't, but I'm thinking it will be. But they posted that anything released a week prior to is fair game. So I'm stressing about that one, that I have to cram in a bunch more games before my flight.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I don't know. It just depends on when it comes out. If they're doing it like the second week or first week of January, that's not a whole lot of time to figure out all these battle plans.
Yeah, maybe it'll leak, but
yeah.
Well, I'll definitely be one of the people that will offer up my time to train with you. That'd be fun.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Yeah.
All right, personal experience. Nick, you at Bloodstorm, at both of them actually, you did 2-1, and you placed favorably. Bloodstorm, we said that you had 2 favorable matchups, and then the middle one, which is against our buddy Hank, was maybe some good stress testing. Would you say the other 2 were stress testing, or more just kind of, it worked out in your favor?
So the other 2 weren't so much stress testing, but they were testing a modification that I made to the list, which we'll get into, and it worked really well in my favor.
Right. The funny thing is people keep hearing, because I mean, let's be honest. Jonas is a very good tactical host for the channel. But we've been trying to get him to play more tournaments. He was gonna come to Bruges, but another engagement he had came up and got in the way. But Jonas just doesn't play a whole lot of tournaments, and so thus far on the channel, I think you and I have been the only ones talking about tournaments. I think Lawrence did one video, and that's been it. It's been you and me for most of the rest. Jonas did one too, I believe. But so everyone is seeing your list, like a modification, a slight modification of your list so many times that if people haven't heard enough about how Flesh Eater Courts works, they're definitely just not listening.
It's just with the one build, right? So it's like I said in multiple ones, I like to tweak and build as the season goes on.
Right.
So, but that being said, I'm very much ready to put this on the shelf for a minute.
Right. Yeah, Elf on the Shelf. All right, Crusade.
All right.
So you had no, contrary to the first tournament, you had no favorable matchups, and it was a bit of an uphill battle the whole time. Do you want to kind of flesh that out a bit for us? Flesh Eater Courts that out for us a bit?
I'll flesh it out. Yeah. So first round was my fault for being on the uphill battle, and I'll talk about that when we do the pairings, me being stupid. The other two, just with the matchups, were just, they were so difficult. They were really, really fun games. But I really had to play like at my top level for there to try and squeeze it out and do as best I can. It was, we'll get into it with the pairings, but yeah, they none of them were, like I said, a walk in the park before. Like I couldn't like turn my brain off ever. I had to be completely on top of everything. So
right. Okay.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing about the lead up to this, so when we get to my list, this is literally the exact list that I wrote for Jonas and my Battletome review for the Zinch book. It's Eternal Conflag list. And after me playing a lot of games beforehand, and you seeing how it works a few times, and me having a very high win record with this list, you were actually pretty psyched for me going into Bloodstorm, thinking I might pull out the whole thing. I unfortunately, even though I went 2-1 at Bloodstorm, and it was one of my best, it probably was the closest I got to going 3-0 at a tournament, and I did, as you see here, I had a strong showing and often was tabling my opponents. 2 out of 3 of them I tabled. I didn't play against a single army that was easy. It was like usually when I play this list against people, like at least 3 times, I brought a second list with me if I went to go visit someone, so that, because I knew that it was going to play really quickly. It's the kind of list that ends in turn 2 really easily. And so I was like, that's no fun for anyone, especially if you've like blocked out your whole afternoon. So I would bring a second list and then play something that's friendlier. And you were actually pretty strongly rooting for me to actually go pretty far on this one. And so when it didn't happen in the first one, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to bring it to the second one. And I know that you were saying that Belgium tends to be, or at least in this tournament, was pretty competitive. I actually tend to find that Belgium tends to be a less competitive than in the Netherlands. And by Belgium, I mean Flanders, the northern half, the Dutch-speaking half. We haven't done a tournament in the French-speaking half just yet, in Wallonia. But as you can see from my horrible score here, I went no wins, 2 losses, and 1 tie. Now the tie, which I said here, the tie was unnecessary. I really should have won that game, but I was against a Numetrica list, which is perfect for this channel. We'll talk about more later. And as I said here, it was almost the polar opposite. Do you have any reactions here to the whole how crazy swinging this whole thing was, and then you hyping the whole list up? And all that, and you wouldn't be wrong with my track record of all the games I've played with this list. I've won most of them, but do you have any thoughts about any of what I just kind of ran through there?
Still don't think I'm wrong. I think it's still got gas in the tank there, because you cleared me. I think it was turn 2. Like, you absolutely kicked my ass with this list. It was amazing, and then watching it just one right after another, it just board clears, and there's no excuse for why this shouldn't, just take the whole thing. And then the fact that, straight at the gate with your first tournament, you had some pretty tough opponents as well. I think you're still pulling this record. I would almost call Crusades an outlier for this list. I'm not buying it. I'm not sold. I think it's still very viable in my opinion.
I agree with you.
But yeah.
I agree with you. And the funny thing is, not a single other player brought Tzeentch to either one of the tournaments, and it's like it blows my mind. I feel like maybe we're in a point of, and Jonas and I talked about this in our last table talk, I think, but people are a little bit maybe oversaturated with Battletome release history. Like in the past 6 months, we've had 1 million Battletomes come out, and I feel like it hasn't been enough time for people to like properly digest what's out there. And I don't know. Anyway, we'll talk more about it later. But thank you for the vote of confidence. Obviously, your list keeps doing well, even if your season, your whole year plus of doing Flesh Eater Courts is coming to an end.
Thank God, everyone will be happy.
Speaking of which, let's look at Feeding Time 4, so named. Yeah, okay, since people have seen this, how about you just kind of like tell us what's different and why? Let's get into the nitty gritty here. Like the little things you changed and why you changed them.
Here's what we changed. Not a whole lot. So I don't believe that I had the Arch Regent on +2 in the last list. I think he was sitting on a +1. And so I buffed him up to give him a command trait for +1 to cast, and also gave him the artifact for +1 to cast. So he's sitting on a +2, which is consistently giving me my spells that I need. Then the only other big change here is I got rid of a mount trait, and I think in the last report I was talking about like the extra Terror guys isn't really pulling its weight. Like it's just not adding up. Mostly because there's a second one that's also casting the same spell, so the War Scroll spell kind of goes to waste, and I was just having a hard time making him worth anything. So what I actually ended up doing was giving the second Terror guys, and you may notice the spelling has been corrected, so the Tarog heists are no more. I gave him the artifact, the Grim Garland, to try this out, which is if you're within 6 inches, it's a -2 to your bravery. So that really can complement well when we talk about flares coming in. So there will be no modifier to the range if I'm positioned well. Also for the Terrorgeist itself, whose ranged attack is you roll a d6 and you add that to a table. And on top bracket, that top number is 6, so it's d6 + 6, and the difference between that dice roll and your bravery is the mortal wounds. And if they're at a minus, then you're also taking a whole lot more mortal wounds in there, and that applies to everyone shooting at that unit, so you can really just chomp things down really quickly. And then also I gave this guy a flaming weapon just to kind of change it up a little bit, because the spells for Flesh Eater Courts aren't great. They're great spells, or they're War Scroll spells, to be honest. They've got like one that actually matters. So I decided to go with Flaming Weapon on the Terrorgeist to try to just give a little bit more power to that. And I would give the Flaming Weapon to the General, because typically 3s and 3s, and then if my Zombie Dragon has its reroll wounds, it's pretty effective. Yeah, those are the only changes to the list. It was just tweaking the gear.
Which weapon do you choose for the Flaming Weapon? The mount weapon?
I give it to the General, because so the Rider. So the damage profile is the Rider does 1 damage, the Claws do D3, and the Bite does D6. So the only one really lacking there, in my opinion, is the General. And on 3s and 3s, especially if you're re-rolling, they're pretty consistent. So I just wanted to give a little bit more damage on that.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, just going with that. And typically the mount, the one with Gruesome Bite, is going to be taking up the Feeding Frenzy. So that if I all-out attack this guy with the Flaming Weapon, it'll be 2s and 3s, re-rolling the wounds, run -1, 2 damage apiece. So it could be a spicy amount of damage.
Yeah.
So trying that out, it worked well for me. It went pretty good. Especially the Grim Garland. I think that's kind of a staple in this list now. It was very effective, mostly because when you think about difference between bravery and your shots, you're absolutely screwed when it comes to death and demons. Like you can't shoot them. So this kind of put them back into the shooting realm.
Right.
Not really easily, but again, it didn't eliminate it. So I just thought I'd try it out, see how it worked, and it paid off.
Sure.
Especially with my pairings with the Bloodstorm tournament.
So, okay. So, you're going to a tournament in Luxembourg soon. Is this the list you're taking, or have you tweaked it again?
No, this is the list I'm taking.
Okay. So is it safe to say that you've more or less, this is kind of the final evolution of this list and you're going to move on to something else, or do you still see some tweaking room here?
So when I think about this list, I picture it of just like a full dragon build with summons. So that's their main thing, is like the tactic here in the tool belt is the summons that you're bringing in, which can be upwards to almost 1,000 points, and then try to figure out how you're going to deal with 3 dragons that now all consistently do something. So they all are pulling their weight in a different way. So I don't think there's a whole lot more I can tweak with this version. I'm starting to play around with the anticipation of bounty hunters dropping off with the flayers and trying to make something fun there. Also shifting focus to different armies, actually. So like I said, I do intend to put Flesh Eater Courts on the shelf for a bit and start dabbling in some other stuff. So maybe your daughters that you're letting me borrow. Thank you for that. So yeah, good stuff there. But yeah, not a whole lot of changes, just minor tweaks.
Yeah. And one other thing that's good for people to know is in looking at the grand strategies that we both would have, if I'm not mistaken, chosen book grand strategies from our battle tomes or the White Dwarf updates. But most tournaments, at least in our area at this point in time, are not allowing battle tactics or grand strategies out of White Dwarf updates or 3rd edition battle tomes. How do you feel about this? Do you like take what's theirs?
I used to take the one for Flesh Eater Courts, which was Growing Kingdom. You just keep 3 of your summoned units alive, which can be pretty easy, but then you have to be very careful about where you're putting things. And my playstyle doesn't really account for that very well. So often I would lose my grand strategy at the cost of winning the game, which at the end is not the worst plan, but it can be risky. So I actually found that Take What's Theirs ended up almost being a score every time, because with my list, it's more of a counterpunch. And when I do, I just kind of keep sweeping through and I'm in your space anyways. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So I see myself taking this more often.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to my list. Technically, I've already talked about this. I don't actually call it Alpha Fire. I don't know why. I guess I've just been calling it Eternal Conflag. So Alpha Fire is probably better. This is literally exactly what I wrote in the book report, or book review. So I'm going to go through it a little more quickly, but I don't anticipate that everyone watched that video, since it wasn't Lumineth oriented, and this channel it tends to be that way.
They did. Don't be bashful. Everyone's seen it.
Oh my gosh. Sub-faction, Eternal Conflagration. And I think it's worth pointing out here the history of where Tzeentch has been with this. In 2.0, in the 2.0 book that came out just before COVID with KO simultaneously, Tzeentch has had multiple sub-factions, 3 sub-factions in particular that were particularly strong at different points. Those would be Host Duplicitous, Host Arcanum, and Eternal Conflagration, which represents the demon half of the 6 potential sub-factions, not counting those from Wrath of the Everchosen. Eternal Conflagration is the one that buffs your shooting units' profiles, but that doesn't mean all of the shooting profiles in your army. It's specific to the horrors that can shoot, including the hero versions of horrors, plus the flamers, including the chariot version, which gives each one of them an extra pip of rend. And so the idea here is that you're trying to max out how, this is the opposite of the normal Tzeentch build, which does a ton of mortal wounds. This is not mortal wounds at all. So we'll get into that in a minute, but real quickly, the grand strategy, once again, like Nick's, was take what's theirs. I really feel like you're really up against take what's theirs or defend what's ours, and it depends on how your army's built. Those are the 2 easiest ones in my estimation for most armies. And take what's theirs is just empirically easier as long as you can get to their side of the battlefield, whereas defend what's theirs means that you can't have any enemy units in your deployment zone, which can be really risky. So I think take what's theirs is kind of the default. Nick and I actually had the same amount of points here in our lists, so neither one of us got the triumph, but I chose Inspired, which actually wasn't even that necessary because the Fate Master is giving a 9-inch bubble of +1 to wound for pretty much my whole army, and the Zongor Enlightened on disc if I go second in a given battle round. For that whole battle round, not just the turn I'm going second on, get +1 to wound anyway. So it's very redundant, but it's more of a failsafe, because bravery is not a huge issue in this list, and neither is charging. So the way this works, I've got a 1-drop list. That was really important, because ultimately what you're trying to do is deep strike the flamers deep into the asshole of the opponent. and then like some serious spicy food, you're trying to light that asshole on fire as fast as possible. So what you've got here is the Gaunt Summoner has changed quite a lot in the past, in the new Battle Tome update. The biggest thing the Gaunt Summoner has changed to be, there's this one rule that has literally never come up for me in like 15 plus games with this dude, where technically you can do some wounds against him and he can auto kill something. Literally has never come up. But what his real good rule now is, and this is important to note, that in Slaves to Darkness he's actually different. The Gaunt Summoner from Slaves only lets you deep strike 1 unit, whereas the Gaunt Summoner from Tzeentch lets you take 2. And so the idea is you take your flamers, your 2 units of reinforced flamers, so that's 12 in total, that go into his silver tower. He has to start on the battlefield, and then he flies 16, and of course you can auto run him 6. So we're talking about 22, plus he can at the end of the movement phase, he can unleash the flamers, deep strike the flamers wholly within 9 inches of him, and then wholly outside of 9 inches of enemy units, which means you can get a max deep strike range of 31 inches, plus the flamers shoot 18, which is an insane amount of reach. Normally, though, the thing is, you want to keep your buff pieces. This is a castle army at the end of the day. Your Fate Master has a wholly within 9-inch bubble of +1 to wound for everything in your army, including shooting attacks. So you want to keep him around the flamers. Fortunately, he also flies 16 inches, so that's pretty easy to do. And then your 1 Burning Chariot you've got in this list flies 14 inches and has a 9-inch bubble wholly within of +1 attack for each flamer, which takes them from, I believe, 19 attacks. Is that right? Yes, 19 attacks per unit to 25. Now here's the profile. 6 flamers have 25 attacks at normally 3+, 4+, and a no rend, and then D3 damage. But Eternal Conflag gives them an extra pip of rend, so they're at -1. Then, if they're shooting at a unit that has 5 or more models, that +1, they get a +1 to hit, which means you're often sitting on a 2+ without even having to use all-out attack. And then, the Fate Master's giving them +1 to wound, so you're looking at 25 attacks per 6 at 2s, 3s, -1, D3. But I've taken a Purple Sun in the list, which there's an ability that the General has that lets me add 9 inches to the casting range pretty easily, giving me a 25-inch threat range for the Purple Sun after it moves, which means those flamers, which get dropped turn 1, you cast the Purple Sun with Fate dice, or Destiny dice, so you're more or less guaranteed to get it off. And you're basically shooting into whatever you want with -2 rend. Also, the spell Arcane Suggestion is a modular spell that lets me choose between -1 to save, -1 to hit and wound, or no command ability receiving or issuing for 1 unit until you're falling hero phase, which is almost always the right answer, because it means not only is it -1 to save, but it's turning off Inspiring Presence, it's turning off Rally, it's turning off Auto Run, but it's also turning off All Out Defense, which is effectively the same as -1 to save, if they're really trying to protect that unit for not only the shooting phase but also the combat phase. Which means you can get with those flamers up to effectively Rend -3 in a sense. Other things I haven't covered here, the Gaunt Summoner can also has the spell Fold Reality, which can bring back all of your flamers, especially if they get down to 1. Very easy to, it's a 1 in 3 chance that you bring back all of those flamers if the spell goes off. And that's even if they're in combat, so that's pretty amazing. Let's see, the Magister also can turn someone into a Chaos Spawn, and don't forget the new Burning Sigil of Tzeentch gets auto-cast. It's one of the Tzeentch endless spells. Gets auto-cast before the game, and It gets placed 18 inches upfield, and anyone at the end of the movement phase that's within 9 inches on a 4+ suffers D3 mortal wounds, and the first unit that ends up losing a model, or at least this is how it originally was worded, there's some kind of clarification needed here, but at least, or well, just one unit, might not have to be the first, in any given turn turns into a chaos spawn. So in one of my games, I'll talk about in a minute, I had 7 chaos spawns summoned in one game, which was insane. Further tricks that this list does, Chiric Acolytes are just there to fulfill battle line. The Zongor Lighten on disc, which Nick hates with a righteous vengeance.
Passion.
They turn off command ability usage in the combat phase just by standing within combat of them. And then the Tome of Eyes is just kind of there for points. It gives the caster rerolls on casts. So one thing that you might wonder is, what am I doing about summoning in this list? I've actually had numerous games where summoning hasn't even happened because either the game ends too early or you're just not generating enough spells for a Tzeentch list. It's not that magic heavy. A lot of people think Tzeentch is inherently anti-magic. Yes, I've got 3 unbinds that are at +1 to unbind, but that's all that I've got that's particularly strong. And I'm not really saving those destiny dice for those unbinds. I'm saving them for getting shots through or the spells that I really need. So if I were to summon something, it's usually either 10 blues just for extra defense or bodies, and or it would be to summon a replacement Exalted Flamer, which is a cheaper version of the Burning Chariot for 12 fate points, or fate points. If they kill that Burning Chariot, who's giving me those +6 attacks per unit, so that's +12 attacks for my Flamers if I've got all of them still on board within range. You're replacing him for only 12 fate points just to keep that buff going. So anyway, Nick, that's a lot of talk. Do you have any thoughts about this that you want to share with our listeners out there?
Yeah, it's a really tough list. I hated it. It was everything that counters me, turns off my command point, shoots me immediately, chews through all my rend, and it's an absurd amount of shots. So it's a very tough list. So like I said before, I still think it's got juice.
I do too, and I've made some edits to it that I'll talk about at the end. But I think it depends. At tournaments in general, I've been going up against very tanky armies. Like almost every army I've played is a bad matchup for this list, but I even often still end up winning. I think that's a good testament to the list, but it's really made me earn my work here, earn my keep here by having to actually outplay someone in order to win with it if it's against a tanky army. That said, sometimes you go up against something that you think is going to be tanky, like a Nurgle, and then you just end up tabling them. So it can be kind of surprising. But let's move on to the tournament itself, the tournaments themselves. We've got a Blood Knight here. We were debating which graphic we were going to use because, as you see, there's a lot of doubling up of the list that we ended up playing. So obviously you're seeing 12 different games represented here. Nick had to play kind of the same stuff over and over. He played Beasts at 2 different tournaments. He played Stormcast at 2 different tournaments. And then he played Ideneth and Soulblight. I also played Ideneth at a tournament. I played Soulblight another 2 times. And so in total, we decided Soulblight won out, and all 3 lists had Blood Knights in them. So here we are. So Nick, let's maybe take turns. We'll do your Bloodstorm, my Bloodstorm, and back and forth. Tell us about your Bloodstorm experience with these particular matchups. Walk us through the games.
Yeah, so I could do this relatively quickly. With the Beast, this is really where the Garland came in. So this list was comprised mostly of Dragon Ogres. Dragon Ogre Shaggoth was the only hero in the army. So it was bound to the Kronspine Incarnate, and then he had a bunch of Ogres. He had a unit of Skyfires and also a unit of Enlightened on disc. So those were my favorite. I was worried about them. So when it actually kind of ended before it started, deployment was Dragon Ogre Shaggoth in the front, and Kronspine in the middle of the army. So I think for those of you that know how this works, you can picture how that went. Shagath actually ended up charging me and dying. So then the Kronspine locked up his Skyfires and also the Enlightenment Discs. So then when it came to just Dragon Ogres, the Flayers and the Dragons just burned through on the Bravery because I was knocking it down to 4 Bravery, so it's D6 plus 2 mortal wounds every time. So it was pretty brutal, went pretty quickly as well. Yeah, Kronspine is not fun if he's in the middle of your army, so you gotta watch out for that.
So, question for you on that.
Yeah.
When we talk about new Beasts of Chaos, as in the interim period with the White Dwarf update, we're often talking about the Herdstone bonuses, and we're talking about a lot of cheap summoning, which got a little bit nerfed with the most recent Battle Scroll, but I don't know if this qualified for the most recent Battle Scroll, so it might not have. How much of that came into play with this particular game? And then same question will go for the other one, which you can answer now if you feel like.
So, yeah, comparing the two, there was no summoning really in the first one, and a lot of summoning in the second one. Because the first one, it was dead before there was really any summoning to happen. The hero was dead, so he's not getting that. And then Kronspine was just eating everything else, and then all of his units had died at that point. So he's not doing any sort of rallying anyways, because, I'm clearing the unit out outright. So yeah, no summoning to be seen in the first game. Really, that was a threat. Yeah, so that game ended at 20-0, so pretty definitive on that first one. And because of the 20-0, there was only one other person that got also a 20-0 in that tournament, and that was Hank. So me and Hank matched up for our grudge match, if we will. We joke because in our previous tournaments, Hank took first place and I took second. He had beat me probably by 3 or 5 points due to strength of schedule. So we always just joke that we have a rivalry. We finally got to play, and yeah, he corner hoarded me just like I typically do. Created almost an impenetrable bubble and played it really, really well. I got greedy, so I was charging when I shouldn't have and doing all these other things. And then he came back with his eels and his king and slapped me like they do. There was a turning point in that game. It really came down to dice rolls. He killed a dragon more than I would have thought he would have, and so that really turned it. There was an opportunity for me to maybe turn the game around a little bit, but it just didn't work out that way. So then he ended up beating me that game. And I don't get a lot of practice against Deepkin, so I was really happy to play against someone that really masters that list very well. So it was really good practice. That's where the stress testing, I think, came in.
Yeah, did Hank win that tournament, or did he just place highly?
I believe he won that one. Yeah.
Okay.
I think he took them both. Yeah. And then for the last game, it was against Stormcast, which was comprised of a bunch of chariots, Celestin Prime and whatnot. So that was the bulk of it. Again, shooting really came into play here because they were pretty tanky. So I don't really have the craziest of Ren, but if I can just chew through your bravery, that helps quite a bit. And so like I said, that Garland really carried its own weight of just really knocking down bravery as a whole. It was a strong start for them, but then my list, as I've mentioned multiple times, is a counter list. So once he had initially charged in, I counterpunched and then kind of won priorities and sweeped and cleaned up for another pretty intensive win there. Yeah. So it ended with a 2-1.
How do you feel about the chariots? There was like 6 chariots or so, right?
Yeah, they can be pretty spicy on the charge, and then they are really tanky. So with some of them, I was like, oh my god, I expected to get this in one go, not have to spend a feeding frenzy to clear this thing out. So, but it was helpful to kind of keep things in combat. So I was getting pretty good charges off of like my summoned units, so making sure that those things can't move at all. So that was pretty important. And then just cleaned it up.
Yeah, those chariots are pretty nuts. I think they're 165. 12 wounds on a 3-up save, do some good mortal wounds on the charge, and aren't horrible in combat. And you compare that to a lot of the other chariots, even at a similar price point, and it's just hard to argue for them. Like, there's a reason why people spam those, and they're on a big base, which can really just protect what you need to protect. Did the Celston Prime end up doing any work?
No, not that I can recall. It's been a minute, so I can't. It didn't stand out. I think we might have shook hands beforehand because everything was in combat and about to die.
Oh yeah, especially if it deep struck in turn 2 or 3. I was looking at Hank did in fact win both tournaments. By the way, that's one of the reasons why we wanted him on the thing, but it just didn't work out timing wise. And he was playing Iron Rock for those that are interested, with a whole bunch of eels. I've got the list right here. A king with the normal like load out, Loton, 3 Morsar, 6 Morsar, 10 thralls, 2 Alopexes, 2 Alopexes, all with harpoons. So what I'm curious about the game with Hank. How was the timing for getting the high tide stuff, the fight first stuff? Did he end up pulling the king button on turn 2, or did he hold out to turn 3?
So he was in the corner, and we were playing Silk Steel, so I actually used all my summons to grab every single objective to just kind of have the upper hand there and make him come to me if he was going to deploy in the corner. But then again, like I said, I got a little greedy, and I was like, I'll charge in, why not? And then I went, oh yeah, that's not fun. And so then I would get the turn, and again, not a lot of practice against Deepkin and what they can do with shooting, so I thought I properly screened off my dragons well in turn 2, and then he goes, nope, and shoots them all off. I'm like, great, now I've got exposed dragons. Charged in. He didn't actually need all that, so he did his strike first ability, and then he was just clearing out by the time we even got to turn 3. It was falling apart. So, lesson learned there of really take your time with that one. And then if he's going to deploy like that, I should have really exploited that more than what I did.
Question about your bravery shooting. Are they shooting attacks, like actual profile for shooting, or are they abilities?
Actual profiles for shooting.
Say that again. Sorry, it cut out a little bit.
It's an actual profile, but it's got the star where it just says so. Okay. You just roll.
So then you are unfortunately locked into his. You have to shoot the closest unit.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's real sensitive to mortal wounds, especially the king. So I thought maybe you could get by with that, but
the challenge was getting to him. So he deployed really far, so in that turn, getting to him, I wouldn't have gotten the shot off, and then I'm in a very precarious position for a counter if I didn't get the turn. So I mean, there's a lot of coulda, woulda, shouldas there. So, but I enjoyed the game, learned a lot. I think I would do it differently. So we'll see. Yeah. I mean, me and Hank seem to always just keep missing each other, so I imagine we'll play each other again.
Sure. My Bloodstorm experience started with Ideneth, and I was playing against my buddy Alex. I was worried about, as I mentioned before, against getting lined up against KO because of the shooting, but my second least desired list would have been Ideneth. And maybe to my advantage here, this particular Ideneth list, which again, what I'm referencing here is the shooting rule, the anti-shooting rule. You have to shoot the closest Ideneth unit, which means he can just screen out everything. And this is the thing, is he took a big block of Reavers, 20, and an even bigger block of 30 Thralls, which meant I want to clear these guys anyway. Thralls can do a lot of damage, so can the Reavers. He had 2 Sharks that I think were in independent units, a Turtle and the King, plus maybe Loton and a Tidecaster. And the idea was deep strike, get in there, and if it was 10 Thralls, my whole unit of Flamers, 6 Flamers, would have to shoot 1 unit of 10, which would just clear it, but then a lot of shots would be wasted, a lot of potential. But with a big unit of 30, I had the advantage of, I want to clear all these anyway, and I'm basically getting to kill 3 units at one time if he had taken them at 3 separate 10s. So it's not a big waste, actually. And so what ended up happening, I did the deep strike, and I took out a whole unit of 30 Thralls, and then I think I took out the 1 Shark, and then he charged in, and I took out another Shark, and managed to kill the Leviathan. This is all by, he took out all my flamers, all 12 of my flamers, by the way, in turn 1 in retaliation. But I still managed to end up tabling him, which was kind of insane. I'm not even 100% sure how it happened. But I ended up tabling him anyway, I think because I got rid of all the big threats pretty early on and then just had to clean up. And I never even summoned the more flamers or anything. I summoned 10 blues, I think, to get some more shots in. And then the Zongoran Lightning on Disc ended up cleaning up and some spells. So ended up tabling him, which was kind of crazy. But it's worth pointing out that just because you table someone does not mean in tournament points or battle plan points you end up like going 20-0. I ended up getting 15-5 on the point. No, it was 18-2. It was 15-5 in the next game. So I almost got a 20-0, but he still managed to get enough points that I didn't pull out the whole thing. Which led me into my second game, which was Soul Blight, against my buddy Paul Fondevide, who was also going to be in this chat, but we couldn't get the timing down. Paul and I played his kind of... Paul does kind of like a Nick style of playing, where he just subtly tweaks his list over time. He doesn't really... mix it up a whole lot. So I'd played this list before, and he totally destroyed in one of my least favorite games of my Guild of Summoners list. He took this list and just alphaed the crap out of me. But he's basically just cast a whole bunch of Castellite Blood Knights plus like Lord Vordry, which is the named version of the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, plus Vingorian Lord, plus Manfred with his like teleport thing, and then he had like a couple dire wolves, and he got hit. He got some bad luck, but he got hit real hard by the Burning Sigil, which creates all the chaos spawns. Like I said, it created 7 to the point where I didn't actually have chaos spawns enough models, and I had to ask you if I could basically buy some off of you, which we're figuring out our trading or whatever, because you kind of went in on the Eternal Conflagration list, and now you're having second thoughts about it.
Right.
Anyway, it took me all 5 turns to table him, and tabling Soulblight is extremely difficult, and you have to ask yourself, what does it mean to even table a Soulblight list, because they can bring back units? Does it mean you have to kill even all their summons and at the end of the game, or do you just have to kill their original list that was on the battlefield? I also ended up one of this chaos spawns was actually Prince Vordry himself, which is pretty amazing. So I walked out of those 2 games feeling like, oh my god, I'm gonna like take this tournament. I'm feeling really good. And then I get against the captain of the Dutch Worlds team, Jeffrey, who is a very good player and knows what he's talking about. And he brought a Legion of the First Prince list before Legion of the First Prince disappeared as we once knew it, with Be'lakor, Contorted Epitome, and just every fury that's existed on the planet. It was like, I don't know, 30 plus 40 furies. It was too many. And just basically I tried to alpha turn 1. For those of you that don't know, Be'lakor, his 2 big things are he does a lot of things in the old Legion of First Prince, but his 2 big things are he's unrendable, which is not good for my list, and 2, he has this like control type element where at the beginning of the enemy hero phase he can choose a unit, and basically they can't do anything until his following hero phase. So if you get a double turn, you're kind of screwed. The thing is, he has to choose a unit that's on the battlefield, and my flamers were all up in the sky, so they don't count as they can't be targeted. And I ended up getting everything I needed, and he couldn't screen just well enough that I couldn't get any flamers into him. So I put all 12 flamers into Be'lakor and got him down to like something like 2-3 wounds. If a couple dice had gone a little differently, it would have ended up changing the whole game. And this was on Realmstone Cache, where I was in the middle. I was in a great position, but he just ended up movement shenaniganing the Furies so that they basically surrounded me in a big circle along the perimeter of where all the possible Realmstone Cache explosions could go, and ended up essentially surrounding me in a way that I couldn't do anything about. If I had killed Bellicor, none of them would have been able to keep coming back, and there's a number of other things that would have fallen off, but it just didn't play out that way, and we talked it out in a game that took quite a while to play, and he ended up taking third place in the tournament. So it was a bitter end, not in terms of playing Jeffrey, but in terms of I'd had such a good setup leading up to this moment, and then I just kind of faced a matchup that just didn't quite lean the way I needed it to. But honestly, I'm really happy I didn't have to go against KO, and for Bloodstorm, I didn't have to play against a single person that I don't already like, which is a win in my book. I had a great time that day. So, any other concluding thoughts about either how my games went or Bloodstorm in general, Nick?
I think just what did you end up going? What was your rank?
I tied. And there were 4 people that tied for 7. So when I do that, I take the average of that. So I'm calling it 8.5. That we all got 8.5. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good.
It worked out. I feel like that third slot could have been my slot. I don't know how Jeffrey performed in terms of his differential stuff, but I definitely would have obviously placed higher. What did you end up going at the tournament?
I took 5th at Bloodstorm.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was battling it out for. If I had scored better, I think with Hank, I could have probably done a little bit better. But yeah.
Sure. All right.
What it is, I'll take it. Yeah. Moving on.
Yeah. Let's hear about your Crusade experience.
Yeah, Crusade was a tough one. So jumping into the matchups, the first one was a pseudo kind of falling star. So it was the Star Drake with the Comet and the Slam. He had some fulminators, and then the things were riding the weird chickens that I can never remember the name of.
Paladors,
yeah, that's the one. So those were annoying. Yeah, it was a good game. I started off on the back foot for this one because the first game was the prize of Gallant. And I kind of almost did a corner deployment to try and range away as best I can from spells and whatnot. But in doing so, I ranged the objective. So he picked the, obviously, to activate the objective furthest from me, so I couldn't actually get on there. And I was starting at a point deficit, so it was quite difficult to come back. But then, after a series of lucky shenanigans on my part, so some good shooting, some good combat, I was able to really just drop some of his units. I would say the big turning point was one of my charges. I was able to charge the chariot, but then pile in to get his fulminators locked in combat, and he wasn't able to clear me off in such a way because he couldn't get both fulminators, and so I was preventing a fulminator charge until I could get my reinforcements in there to really clear them all out, which is ultimately how that went. So that was good. Came back and won that one. It was a fun game. And then the second one, I finally got what I asked for. I've been asking multiple times just in these videos where there's a man named David there who I always appreciate his models. I think they look great. And then he's always relatively playing around me. And then I'm like, I would love to play that guy because he seems like a really good Soulblight player and he good personality and everything. So finally got my wish. We paired up. Obviously, one of the worst combos against mine, death versus death, and most of our stuff doesn't work very well. It was an extremely hard game. A lot of chess playing of just thinking about what's going to happen next. Barely was able to squeak it out, started to chip away over time. He hit me pretty hard and created a really, really defensive line. There was a point where he thought he had it because he even made a comment. He's like, "This is the longest flesh eater turn I have ever seen in my life," which it was. I debated back and forth for probably like a solid 10 minutes of if I should take the turn or not. Everything in me said, "You're being dumb. You shouldn't take the turn whatsoever." But I was like, I'm going to be greedy and I'm taking the turn. Seems to be a theme with me getting greedy. But it worked out. So I played it. I took the turn, got what I needed out of the turn, and then it kind of it worked in my favor. But I think a smarter play would have been to give it away because I was in a very, very defensive position and he would have had to come to me. I had a little bit more of the board control. So a lot of back and forth work there. Terror guys clearing out grave guards and all this stuff in one go. So that was pretty funny. So yeah, it was a really fantastic game. Really glad I finally got to match up against him, and I had a great time. So it lived up to the hype and the expertise and the skill. So I was very pleased. Yeah, so I ended up winning that one, and then to the Beasts, the second round of the Beasts. This one was pretty different. A lot of Beastigors, so a lot of it had a lot more bodies than you would see with a Dragon Ogre list. And then my favorite is the Zangor Fun. And so this was a combination of on discs, on foot, on hands, however you want it. They were everywhere. Yeah, he effectively shut down all of my feeding frenzies, everything. So it really became a problem of getting in there and being able to do what I needed to do. Had some good moments with the Grim Garland again. So he charged a unit of Beastigors into my flayers. So, and I think it was 3 of them. So doing that, I cleared a unit. It was either a unit of 10 or 20. I don't know how many it was. I think it was 10. I just cleared them out right away, so they didn't even get to attack. So that was really helpful. And that was one of the closest games that I had. I ended up losing that game by my grand strategy only. So that was
right.
Pretty intense. We scored full points, I think almost, and even extra points each one because we were playing in the presence of idols. So, yeah, that one was intense and really tough. Summoning a shit ton of cockatrices everywhere. Those things are so annoying and so cheap to bring in. So he was just putting them out, and the damage that they can do is, not insignificant. So they're really a problem you got to deal with. So, yeah, it was a really intensive game. And yeah, wasn't able to pull through on that one. I think we were both playing for 3rd place at that point. So after that, yeah,
he ended up getting it, right?
Yeah, he took 3rd place after that. I don't know how his first games would have went. I had a pretty good scores, differential scores. So I don't know if that would have put me into the second or not. I don't know how Nikki, who ended up taking second, was scoring. But yeah, doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Yeah, it was a tough matchup. I still have a very hard time dealing with them. Yeah.
Well, you got a new battle tome underway for Beasts, and I think everyone's going to be excited to see what happens there. And I know that the whole cockatrice being a monster thing caught you a little off guard because he's a small guy, and it only costs 110 points. He's one of the cheapest monsters. But here's the thing: is in the new Slaves to Darkness book. The Mindstealer Spheranx and the Fomeroi Crusher both used to be, I think they were like around 95 points before, and they both used to be monsters. And in the new book, they took that away from them. So I have a feeling the cockatrices of the world are going to go the same way, where the monsters will only be things that are behemoths otherwise, because a cockatrice is not a behemoth. So I feel like GW is heading in that direction. So maybe that'll be a little bit more level playing field there.
Yeah.
So of the people you've played, it's actually kind of interesting because most of the tournament reports I've covered have been in Belgium, or a good chunk of them. Your Ideneth game versus Hank was not only a friend of ours, but I played against him with my Stormcast list in Mechelen that one time, and so we've already talked about Hank before. And then your Soulblight game with David was a game that I talked about that I had in Antwerp with my Teklian Dragons build. So some of these names keep coming up, but it doesn't mean that the community is not large enough that there aren't new names. There are definitely people that we keep meeting for the first time, which would be some of the lists that I ended up playing. I guess. Looking at this, the Soulblight list here was not a new name. In fact, it wasn't. Not only was it not a new name, but it was not a new list for the last tournament because the Soulblight list was Paul Fonderweide again. Another reason we wanted to have him on the tournament report here, and it was literally a rematch. Unfortunately, the first time I'd really caught him off guard, and that worked in my favor. And this time he was much more prepared. Honestly, I think I played about as well as I could. I was using the Purple Sun as a blocking mechanism to get his charges in, because you have to land a charge within a half inch of a model, and even though you can walk through endless spells, you can't end on one. So I was actually putting the Purple Sun in my own face after a moment, and had nowhere near as much luck with stuff as I did before. He deployed in such a way that it was... harder for me to get in there, and he ended up basically tabling me by the end of turn 2, which is what he did in our Guild of Summoners game too. I just had an even more fragile list this time, so it was a little bit sad, actually. And I knew that this was not going to be favorable for me because he learned so much from the first one. He played well. I played as well as I could, but it just didn't work out in my favor. And then the Lumineth game, I just had extremely bad luck here. I had a lovely game with Rick, a new friend. That was friends. He came with our Dutch group, actually. In fact, I went the whole day only playing people that I could have played against in the Netherlands. No Belgians whatsoever. So it was almost as if I didn't even need to leave. In fact, I think all 3 of them live in the Rotterdam area. So I could have just gone to Rotterdam for a club day. But for the Lumineth fans on the channel, he was playing the Alarith Emetrica build with 25 Stone Guard, 2 Cows, one of which was a Volinor, 2 Stone Mages, 5 Dawn Riders, and I think that was the list. And this is a horrible matchup for this version of the Tzeentch. If I was playing my Guild of Summoners, I would have had a field day with him because it's all Mortal Wounds. But my list is all based off of -1, -2 Rend, and unfortunately, not much of what I do works against that Alarith build, which ignores not only -1 Rend, but -2. But I did manage to kill everything but 4 Stone Guard. And if it weren't for a stupid move where I said I was going to go desecrate their lands, and then by the time I needed to do it, forgot that I needed to do it, I would have actually won the game. It would have been close. I would have gotten like a 12-8 or 11-9, whatever the differential system says. But it turned out to be a tie, and I'm still kicking myself to this day for how that turned out. But it was almost a tabling. And then I played my buddy Dawa, who I don't think I did a tournament report of our last game, which was also at this same venue and same club in Bruges when he played a Seraphon list, and I was playing dragons in, I want to say, Tempest Eye. But anyway, he brought a Trolls list, Scragrot, and a Marshcrawl Sloggoth, plus a bunch of ground gits. And it's just so many so many like wounds absorption that each one of those units of 6 trolls. I think he had 3 units of 6, and I just did not have good luck with this, and he basically ended up tabling me too, and we called it a day. It was a very spicy day of once again playing against lovely people. In fact, all 6 of these games were against lovely people. But it was the exact opposite. It was just as tanky as the first time, but this time it just did not go in my favor, and it's the worst I've done in a three game tournament, I think, ever. So it was a little spicy, but that kind of brings us to a close here on the tournaments. Do you have anything that you want to add to the tournaments in general, Nick, or about how my games went for the Crusade in general?
No, I think we keep saying it. It's like I want to see that list again in another tournament. It's also interesting because, like you said, it's all the Dutchies, so they're all people that we brought in our group of like, oh, okay, how are we doing as the Dutch community? We're getting wins off of each other, so that was interesting to see. And I was very interested to see Dawa's Gits list as well, because it was his first debut of that one. So.
Yeah, I had just played against. Are you playing with Dawa in Luxembourg? Is he on your team with that list?
He is on my team, yeah.
And with that list, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, at a trainings day that we have for the World's team here in the Netherlands, I had played against Olaf, who's another friend of ours, who had been playing the exact same list. And I played a softer version of my list there, but he also kind of devastated me. So evidently the Trolls build is still really solid, and it's just a lot of wounds to chunk through, and they regenerate so well. So hopefully you guys do really well in Luxembourg. Which brings me to kind of a concluding slide here. The results, we've already talked about this. Our buddy Hank took first place in both. Nick, what did you said you got, what place was it in this?
Yeah, 5th place in Bloodstorm and 10th place in Bruges.
Okay. I got 7th and then like 30th out of 34, so not very good. But I did place better than a few people. I want to look up what Paul got real quick. I know, let's see, Bloodstorm. I can pull this up real fast because we were going to all talk together, so that would be fun. At Bloodstorm, Paul got... Oh yeah, we tied for 7th, so we both were in a 4-way tie there. And then at the Crusade, let's see, I got this too. Here it is. Paul got 7th. Is that right? 1, 2. Yeah, 7th place. So he managed to get 7th place at both of them. So pretty good. I definitely was the low performer out of all of us, but the lowest. But it was still really fun. I had a great time. What kind of future goals do you have coming up for this list? Are you using the exact same list with Luxembourg?
Yeah, so right now I'm just kind of riding out the season, so I don't really foresee myself doing too much with this list. It's a safe bet. It's kind of becoming old hat now, so like the gig is up, or the jig is up, I should say, is the expression. That most people know what I do with it in the Netherlands, so I need to kind of change it up and do some more stuff with the other units. So I've got some other things cooking, like I said, with the flares, trying to see what I can do with that, and then also getting ready to just put them away for a minute and start playing with some other armies, have some new fun tinkering time.
Is it safe to say you're going to be leaning towards slaves, or is that ship not quite sailed yet?
Yeah, it's TBD. I'm still trying to figure out which one matches my playstyle the most. So doing a lot of test runs on TTS, so Tabletop Simulator, and seeing if I like it.
Sure.
I'm very persnickety that way.
And if you had a Spotify year-in review of your Flesh Eater Courts run, what would you kind of summarize it as? What are you kind of feeling here?
Spotify and your review?
Do you know? Oh, I guess you don't have a. It's a thing that people.
You kids and your terms.
Okay, well, I'm 11 years older than you.
I can't keep up with these youth. Am I right, audience? Come on.
At the end of the year, Spotify will often give you your stats of like your most listened to albums and tracks, and like how many minutes you logged and all that. Like, what if something was keeping track of the stats of your Flesh Eater Courts? Like, I think you had a really good run with it.
Yeah, I think there was one tournament. I think I might have done 1-3, but everything has been 2-1 or up with this list.
Yeah.
And then, oddly enough, well, not oddly enough, but with GTs, it's 3 2s and 2 3s going through that. So there wasn't a whole lot of GTs that I got to with this list, unfortunately. So mostly 1-dayers. But yeah, overall, it was pretty consistent. But what I would say that got better was the amount that I had to struggle to get these wins. So those kind of shifted a little bit with, just tweaking and making it fit better to my play style.
Sure.
I guess Games Workshop did me a favor. They upped the incarnate points real quick, so I took that out of my list really fast. I think I only got a couple games in before I put them back on the shelf. I just finished painting them and doing my base with it.
Did you ever play with him in a tournament with the model itself?
No, never made it.
Oh no.
That's all right.
So my list stuff, I'm kind of sitting on the precipice of a few new things, but as far as the Zinch list is concerned, I recently played a game against our buddy Tone, who was on the Dutch Worlds team last year, and he brought a slaves list, and I tweaked the list to have a Soul Scream bridge so that I can teleport the flamers if needed. That's actually a recommendation from Dawa. And maybe more importantly, to use as a screen from people coming in to charge, because I could just put that giant base. I can even put both bases right in front of my flamers as a deterrent to be able to land there. They'll have to dispel it, but it's still a deterrent. And then it gives me a little more flexibility. I also took the Enlightened on disc out and downgraded them. You could say, for 10 more points, I get 6 Enlightened on foot, which means I get, what is that? I go from 12 wounds on a 4+ to 18 wounds on a 4+. That creates on 6 bases, which is even more of a screen. And they're, they still shut down command point usage in the combat phase, which I think is fulfilling the role I need. Yes, I lost the speed, but they're just sitting out, camping out in front of my flamers. And then I downgraded the Chariot to a regular Exalted Flamer who doesn't need to really be that fast anyway, because I found that the Deep Strike, the super far Deep Strike doesn't really need to happen. A lot of times you just need to get to the middle of the board, and then 18-inch shooting range is fine. So I got rid of the Arcane, what is it called? The tome that, the Burning Tome, or whatever it's called. Tome of Eyes, because you can't take 4 endless spells in a list. So that's where the Soul Scream Bridge is. And otherwise the list is the same, I believe. And I think it's actually going to perform even better. It's a little less mobile, but then the bridge makes up for that, and definitely a little bit more defensive. So I'm going to keep trying the Eternal Conflag list. I'm pretty psyched about it. I have plenty of other Tzeentch builds that I'm also psyched about, and I have all 4 of my birds now, so I'm eager to give the Guild of Summoners another run. One of the birds is a small bird, and one of them is a big one, so we're calling Little Bird Big Bird, Little Bird. Furthermore, I've got that Skaven list that I'm almost, I've got the rest of the boxes underway for what I need, and I just need to 3D print some gutter runners. And then I've got a, what's it called? Why am I blanking on the Squigs list that I'm super excited about that might be a thing for the new Battle Tome for Gits. I don't really want to play Gits as normal. Maybe Spiders or Trolls one day, but right now I just want to do Squigs. So that's kind of the future there, and we're wrapping up the year here. A great year of Warhammer in my estimation. Third edition's been just nothing but great. Ultimately, I think GW's been knocking out of the park with just continuously getting better and balancing things across the board. Do you have any other end of the year kind of evaluations or kind of thoughts you want to throw in there before we close up today?
I think I'm just looking forward to trying new things, finding my next army for the upcoming season, and then just looking forward to LVO. So that'll be interesting.
Oh yeah,
well.
I think it might be fun to have you just do a little table talk where you talk about LVO a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Obviously, neither myself nor Jonas will have been there, but it'd be nice to hear what you have to say about one of the most kind of widely publicized events in the Warhammer community. So.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, thank you again for watching. Once again, sorry again that it's been so long since our last video, almost a month. But as always, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Jump in that Discord where I'm pretty sure Jonas and the rest of the community is still very active. And let us know what you thought of this tournament report. As always, we really appreciate you guys sticking with us, and I know Jonas has some more content for after the holiday season, and I'll be getting that Math Hammer video up sooner than later, hopefully. So thanks again, we'll be in touch, and Nick, thanks again for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.